Several people mentioned in the comments of my video on the Chrome pin that I should convert the Gru-Mobile into a Mad Max car. I'm currently working on a major Mad Max project, but I have to agree it would be fun to give it a try, and this is what I set out to do. But before I get started, I want to say that this video has been sponsored by Meso. So my thanks goes out to Meso CNC controllers for supporting makers like me and making CNC easy. Alright, let's get started. Looking at the Gru-Mobile, the first thing that came to my mind was to give it big wheels to offset the disproportionately small set the car has. I found this set of wheels that was sent in by a subscriber for just this sort of thing. I'm not sure what they came off of, but I will say that they are the exact scale I had in mind. Now admittedly, I spent some time trying to figure out how to attach the back axle onto the Gru-Mobile. The wheels luckily pulled off the axles, which makes things much easier. But after fooling with it for a while, it finally occurred to me to just cut valleys in the base and the body to accept the axle. There was a notch in the back of the base, and I used that as a guide. I used small micro needle files to make these cuts. I started out with a triangle for maximum control, and then later switched over to a round one for the final cuts. The process was repeated for the front wheels, and was much simpler as I could just use the pre-existing axle path as a guide. These files make quick work of plastic, so I had to really sneak up on the final dimension. If I overshot, it would end up having wobbly wheels, so I took my time on this part so I would get it right. This is one of those times I like working with plastic. This only took a few minutes to do, whereas metal parts would have taken quite a bit longer. Of course, there are trade-offs. The plastic base bends, so I needed to leave a little bit extra on the back so it would apply pressure on the back axle. If the base was metal, the fit could be perfect. The back axle will need some spacers on it to keep the axle and wheels in place. To do this, I cut 2 pieces of styrene tubing. This is one of those times I'm glad I have an assortment of styrene parts, because otherwise I would have had to have made these by hand. The spacers go between the body and the wheels and hold everything in place. I thought about gluing them in, but later decided against it as I found that the car rolled fine and the axle stayed straight as is. Not gluing them in also allows me to take everything apart again in the future. With the wheels on, I started looking for an over-the-top weapon for my over-the-top car. I settled on this machine gun that I think came from a G.I. Joe line. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure you know and will enlighten us in the comments. Anyway, this seemed like something Gru would employ on his Mad Max vehicle. I'm not sure why I feel that way. The gun needs some slight modifications made to it. These modifications are needed to get it to fit where I want it, and also to remove items like the scope and handles that are out of scale. These are all easily cut off with a pair of plastic cutters. Off camera, I'll sand the cuts with some 400 grit sandpaper to clean them up. Just like most small plastic toy guns, there's no opening at the end of the barrel, so I'll need to make my own with a small drill bit and a needle vise. I'll first make a pilot hole, and then using my drill on a slow setting, I'll drill the hole to the desired diameter. A quick tip when working with plastic: you'll notice where I drill the hole there are a lot of small plastic hairs. If you try to sand these off, you just create more of them. So to get rid of them and clean the surface, all you need is a lighter. You don't actually put the plastic in the flame, instead you just get it as close as possible until you see the hairs disappear and the surface smooth out. Then just let the plastic cool. So now I need to find a way to mount the gun to the car. I would like to use the large hole in the back of the gun as a sort of turret. This way the gun can be raised and lowered. Looking through my spare parts bin, I should be able to find some tubing that might fit the gun. I bought all these cutoffs at Hobby Lobby in 2 large bags many years ago. I've used a lot of it up and have never seen them restock it, which is unfortunate. With a little bit of searching, I found a piece that fits perfectly, not too tight, not too loose. I plan to mount the gun in this door, as a way to hide the door but also to incorporate the small overhang above the door into the gun. To mount it I need to drill a hole, and to do that I need to find out what size the tube is. Using some calipers, it looks like it's a 5/32 diameter tube. So digging into my drill box, I came up with the drill bit the same size. If I was drilling into metal, this wouldn't work, but plastic is flexible, so cutting the hole the same size as the tube works fine. As luck would have it, the tube cuts right across the hole for the post, so I need to make a mark and then cut the tube on my bandsaw. I'll do that off camera. After the tube is cut, I'll make sure it does not interfere with the post, which it doesn't, so I'll glue it into place. After the glue dries, I can test out the fit of the gun, and it seems to be working as planned, though I had to turn the gun over so it would not hit the wheels when pointed straight. More of an AK-47 design now. I'll go ahead and put the car truck thing back together and roll it around to be sure everything is working correctly. After I'm content, I'll take it back apart so I can start painting. Starting off with the gun, I'll wash it with soap and water and then spray on some gray primer. After this dries, I'll paint it in burnt iron, which is a metal color by Vallejo. I really love these metal color paints. Each of them have some metal element to them. This one, for example, makes items look like metal that has been overheated. They have another one called exhaust manifold that has some purple to it that gives a tempered metal look to whatever you paint. Really cool stuff. Since I have the paint loaded in the airbrush, I'll go ahead and paint the main body of the car. I'm using around 40 psi to apply it, though you could go higher if you like. It's easy to apply and doesn't need to be thinned. I'm using it here as a way to age and dirty up the model, make it look like it's been out in the desert sun for decades. While it looks pretty cool evenly applied, I want to come back with some acrylic thinners and remove some of it. I want to clean the logo on both sides and then start cleaning individual metal panels on the body. Using a Q-tip, I will remove paint in the middle of each panel, only removing from top to bottom. I'm only using an up and down motion to give a streaked look, and removing paint from the center of each panel is a simple weathering technique, as dirt and dust would collect in the creases and crevices of the panels. Here's how it came out after I was done. I think the paint does a good job as a wash, filling in all the details. It is also persistent enough to do streaking effects. So no Mad Max video would be complete without some known oil wash from Citadel. Here I'll use it on the engine exhaust to give it a blackened, burnt, greasy look. While I wait on that to dry, I'll move back to the gun. Here I want to give the gun some silver highlights, and this is done by using the Rub and Buff silver. I apply a small amount to a paper towel and then spread it around. I then go over the gun, hitting all the high points, the areas that would be worn or hit by flying debris. Alright, so now I'm going to start working on the wheels. I want to keep some of the orange if possible to give the model a small amount of color. If nothing else, have orange rust. So I want to start by adding silver to the inside hub, front and back. The silver won't stick to the rubber wheels, so I don't have to really worry about getting any on them. Not that it really matters, as I'm going to paint over it anyway. Using a paper towel, I will buff the silver and remove any excess. It's not important that I cover the sides of the rims, I just want to make sure that there's plenty of silver in the middle. After I have the silver applied, I'll go over the wheels with some acrylic brown to give it a muddy, dusty look. Here I'll be sure to cover the wheels, but not necessarily evenly, as dust and mud are not even. When I'm done airbrushing the paint, I'll come back with a Q-tip and some acrylic thinners to remove the paint on the tire treads. This is a small detail, but it adds a lot to the realism of the model. The next step will show why I like to use the Rub and Buff. So I painted over the Rub and Buff with acrylic paint. I can use acrylic thinners to remove the acrylic paint, but it won't touch the silver Rub and Buff. Alternatively, if I wanted to remove the Rub and Buff without altering the acrylic paint, I would use mineral spirits. So here again, I'm using acrylic paint as a wash to fill in details and then wiping away the acrylic from all the high points, revealing the silver under it untouched. I'm sure you can think of a lot of cool ways this could be used. The last step I'll be taking with this car is to go over the undercarriage with the muddy brown dust. This just represents the dirt and dust that would have kicked up by the tires in the apocalyptic wasteland. After this dries, I'll put the car back together. So this is the end of this Mad Max video, but not the end of this Mad Max project. I have several ideas for some final details I want to add to this vehicle. However, I have to wait for those items to be shipped to me. So expect the conclusion of this video next week or the following, depending on the mail. And yes, I will be finishing it. Of course, this gap gives you a chance to comment and give out your ideas on any final details or changes that you think should be made. I can't promise that I'll incorporate those changes, but good ideas will be heard. If nothing else, let me know what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.